Hi.
Hi, Jack.
Hi there.
Hello.
How are you guys? And Anais.
I'm well, I'm well.
Fine, thank you. You?
Yeah, I'm fine also. I was quite busy with the kids, but they're now upstairs, so.
Good. Well, we are early, so we won't start. Yeah, I think let's give 10 minutes to everybody.
Yeah.
Where are you living, Anais? In France or somewhere else?
I'm in London, actually.
Oh, in London.
Yeah, I'm based in London.
Okay.
Where are you based?
Yeah, I live near Amsterdam.
Ah, okay. Yes, you did mention this before. I remember now. Is that so? Yeah, yes. Good, true.
And you, Ogden? Well, how
Ogden,
do I say that? Ogden?
Ogden is great. I'm from
Ogden.
Belgrade,
Well,
Serbia.
Belgrade. Okay.
Yeah. So is it more like a webinar style so far as I could see, or is there any interaction in any of the
Yeah, I was kind of watching some sessions, and yeah, Daniel did sort of webinar style from Envision, but in the other session there was more discussion. So John was also in there, so he was trying to push some people to talk, and that's good.
It's good.
Yeah,
It's good. We
Yeah,
need
yeah.
people
But
to, you know.
but overall, I think a lot of people, yeah, are in. I was just checking, 132 are in, so that's not bad, I think.
Yeah, that's very good.
Yeah.
that's cool.
I'm happy because people stick around. We could have expected that people join and then after seeing they go, but no, people join, they stay, they contribute.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
If they don't contribute, at least they listen. So we are sharing and expanding the knowledge. So it's a great thing.
Yeah, and I like the opening also very. It was very good.
Yes. Nick did really well.
And Ogden, are you from the between or not?
Yes.
Yes, but also doing some developing for us Unibright or not?
Yes, I was also doing some developing for Unibright.
Okay, guys, this is recorded. Don't forget. So no
Oh.
private information if you don't want to. Just
no worries. So this is open. Yeah. Yeah. I was working with them. Then I also founded my company together with some partners here in Serbia. We are doing invoice factoring and tokenization actually. So I'm really into this topic, interested into it.
Yeah, cool.
Yeah, we have a subject matter expert to lead the session.
Yeah, that's
so
good.
That's really great.
Stefan is also joining, he told me.
Yes, Stefan is also joining, yeah.
So we'll have Stefan, Brian, we should have Kartik, Andreas. I don't know if we will see anything of Kyle. But maybe we will.
Kyle is a ghost. He needs to be everywhere. I was checking the program and he was everyone added him in the program.
So I've seen on the other sessions, apart from the educational one, the size of the group, the working groups were reasonable. So I didn't see more than 20 people, for example, on the blockchain client. Same for the ZK.
Yes, it was also 22 or something like that.
Yeah, so I think if we have this type of attendance, we can definitely stick in the same group because from what I've seen, not everybody, but we will see when we get there. And
it's going to kill the discussion a little bit if it's too many people in one session. But we can, I mean, if we see we have 20, 25, we can maybe ask people if they would like to split or no.
Yeah.
Not sure. So you will be sharing the slides, right?
Yes, I will be sharing the slides. We have a couple of co-interfaces and phone book. Great, great, great.
Cool.
I can stop share for now and start again. Very quickly. Hi, Nick.
Hi, Anise. Hi, Onion. Jack.
Hi.
You guys are just getting rolling, waiting for the audience to build.
Yes, yes. Well,
Exactly.
it's not 7 p.m. Well, London time, obviously.
Almost.
It's not 2 p.m. ET
Yeah.
yet.
The ZK circuit discussion seems to be running a little bit long.
Okay.
Just as a heads up, I don't know if you're going to have, multiple flow, and the discussion in phone book is hot and heavy at the moment. So, we'll let people know that you're getting ready to start, and we'll keep funneling them your way.
Yes, great. Thanks. I will actually put a note on the live chat as well.
Perfect. Thank you.
Let's give people 5 minutes and then we can start.
Hi.
Is it Stefan?
I'm not sure.
It is me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know why I'm called Schmidt, but I will rename.
Quick question. Are we starting around now? Because there are different time zones, different meeting rooms. I think
Yeah.
we
Yes.
are on time.
Yeah,
Okay.
we are starting like literally in 3 minutes. We are just giving
Yes,
time to people to.
exactly. Thank you for confirming.
Yeah, no worries. Okay, I think we can start now. I'm considerate of time as well because I know Stephanie will have to go in 1 hour, so it's better that we kickstart now. Okay, can you all see my screen? Okay, so for those of you here or on YouTube viewing this now, good morning and good afternoon, everyone. So thank you for joining the Tokenization and Digital Asset Track. Before jumping straight into the topic, as you know, this is a working session. We will still take like 10-15 minutes to introduce ourselves and to make sure that we are all aligned on the topic, what we are working on, and the expected output of the session. So we'll start now. So I am Anaïs Frank. I'm a member of the Baseline Protocol Technical Steering Committee, and I also lead the Standard and Specification team. If you want to contact me during the session, don't hesitate to use the Zoom chat, not the main chat, but the Zoom chat of the track. If there is anything, please feel free to raise your hand as well. And as usual, you can reach out on the Slack for any other thing. We also have Ognen on the line. Ognen, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yes, thank you, Nice. Hi, everybody. This is Kurtić Ognen speaking. I'm a CTO of a Belgrade-based startup Between. That's Belgrade in Serbia. And we are doing or on a mission to try to provide liquidity to small and medium enterprises through invoice factoring and with invoice tokenization. So I'm really eager to hear this topic related to Baseline. As Anais also said, feel free to reach me through the Zoom chat for whatever questions or separate discussions during the summit. And enjoy.
Thank you. So as a reminder, this is a working summit and it's an opportunity for all of us to address the subjects that we will discuss and present today. But it is also a good opportunity to identify project candidates for the Baseline hackathon scheduled in December. So during the summit, we actively encourage contribution to the conversation. For those who are comfortable, of course, feel free to have your camera on. If you want to add your contribution in the track directly, we have a notes tab here. There are clear and straightforward instructions on how to do so. It will be very helpful for future reference and for the conversation if when you add a working note or an idea that you put the initial of your name, as you see in the example here. But most of the work that we will be doing today, we will capture through our mind map. And you will find the link directly in the notes tab here. So the mind map, as you can see, focuses on 3 core themes that we will address successively. So 3 sessions of 45 minutes, 5 minutes to regroup, and 10-15 minutes to present the outcome. So for each of those key working theme here, we will have 1 tab. You will find the description here, including the expected output and the conclusion on that side as well. So I'll go back to this here. So the focus for today is how to convert a baseline record into an on-chain asset. What is the interaction between that baseline record and the on-chain asset, and how do we manage the whole process? So more about governance. So we will try to answer some of the questions below and any additional one really that will emerge through our discussion. And as I mentioned before, we will allocate 40 minutes to every core theme. We will concentrate on those, and then we will aggregate the result in 15 minutes, and then we will present. So for anybody, how many are we? We are 12, so I don't think we will need to consider splitting groups. So we can carry on if more people join, I will just take 5 minutes to do a bit of admin and split the teams, but I think we are ready to go as we are now.
Yes, I also would suggest that the result aggregation part can be avoided if we just have 1 track where all of us are, because we're going to be on the same page. So we can use it for either continuing the sessions or for a break.
Yep, exactly. That's perfect. Thank you. So when addressing the key questions, so covering data, process requirements, infrastructure, we will hopefully get a good idea of what the data model should look like, what are the methods and implementation options, but also I'm sure we will identify key problems and issues to be addressed. So the expected output for that track is really to have items that address all of those items here. So I think we are ready to get started. That's it for the formalities. I will let Ognen provide some context in terms of definition and the use case that we will be using to illustrate. Yeah, the word.
Okay, thank you, Anais. So most of you are, the assumption is that most of you are aware of the baseline already, either through some research before the summit or during the first workshops on the summit. And these are just some of the key definitions that we are going to talk about, just so that we are on the same page. When we talk about an off-chain asset, we are talking about an asset that is a record or a document that is stored in the system of record in the ERP system or Google Doc sheet or whatever system of record that the parties would use. When we talk about the circuit, that is a mechanism to validate a set of business rules off or on chain using the zero knowledge proofs. And this is the mechanism that enables the shared state in the end in the baseline world. The on-chain baseline proof, so the verifiable evidence that is publicly available that something has happened, that the record or a document has passed through some set of business rules. Then we have the on-chain asset, which is just the token representation of the baseline off-chain asset, so the record that was exchanged between two or more parties. And from the baseline docs in the that you can find online, just from the glossary, we have the main concepts of baseline, which is the work group, a set of parties that are identified through a common org registry contract that are interested in sharing the state and business logic via baseline, interested in a specific business use case. And inside of that work group, they could have a number of workflows, one or more, where they have defined steps that constitute a business process that they agreed on between those counterparties, right? And in the end, we have the work step, which a number of them constitute a workflow, and these are discrete processes or operations after which there is a state change on a baseline record. So you can think of it as a status change of an invoice, for example, or something similar. And these are comprised out of tasks, which are then really atomic, like sending a message to the counterparty, initiating a circuit verification, generating a proof, validating a proof, and so on. Regarding the use cases, we prepared just high-level use cases that could be interesting for baseline asset tokenization, and these could serve as leads during our discussion. But of course, if we find another kind of use case more intriguing and more interesting for discussion, we can just jump over these. So the first one, the invoice financing, where we have two companies, supplier and the buyer, and we have a invoice financing platform, let's say, as a third party that are part of our group. And the goal is, of course, invoice tokenization. The supplier wants to get money in advance for the invoice. We have the exchange of invoices via baseline, where which is a record or a proof that this transaction behind the invoices happened. And then we also have the tokenization platform, which would take that invoice and then create out of it a financial instrument, so to say, which is tokenized and then given to the public or to the group of investors to invest in it. There is the use case of project capital funding, where you have a group of construction companies that, for example, want to acquire capital to start a new project. And they're part of a baseline work group where they can together in joint manner work on the project, and then this project can be tokenized or offered to investors so that they can collect the money and start building. And the third one is, for example, artwork, where you would have an artist who has a limited set of prints, which are then, let's say, bought by a number of art galleries, again, as an investment, that then use the baseline to track the artwork, to lend it to different museums or other art galleries, or even to open it up for outside buyers. All of them have a lot in common, of course, and the differences are minor. You would mostly think when you think about the differences in these use cases, you're thinking about token standards, for example, that would be used. You're thinking about the amount of deployments or tokenizations that would happen. So, for example, in the first use case, you can expect really a lot of deployments, while in the second use case, you really would not have that much per workgroup. And some other minor differences that we could touch during the discussion. Okay, so we split the whole session of 3 hours into these three sections, as Anais already mentioned. The idea was that we start with the tokenization prerequisites, do that for 40 or something like minutes, thus assemble the results, and then move to the next one, which is the tokenization, the process of tokenization, and the last one is tokenization, token governance. With the prerequisites, what we want to touch, or what we identified as some interesting topics, is the data and the schema. So what would be a standardized set of fields that's needed in a workgroup before you can even think about tokenizing an asset? The authorization, so who would be the owner? Is there a need for multiple owners, multi-sigs, and so on? What is the cost distribution? So who is paying for the tokenization in a workgroup? Is there a need that you have a shared wallet, or the entity who is, for example, requesting financing is the one who is responsible to pay for the transaction, and so on? The token standards that would be needed to be supported by the protocol. And then we have the privacy and the security obvious requirements. In the you can move to the next one. Yeah, in the tokenization process, we are talking about the deployment steps. Is there a need for a circuit to, for example, validate to be validated just before the asset is tokenized? What would be the architecture of the tokenization module? Should that be a separate baseline infrastructure service similar to the privacy service? Is that done through some kind of a smart contract architecture? And the process of, for example, selecting the token standards. So let's say you have a workgroup. Do you want to have an option to change the token standard that is being used, or do you just stick with one when the workgroup was initially deployed? The last one, so the governance, quite an interesting one. What do we do, for example, if you have a lot of token contracts that are deployed? How do you handle upgrades to those contracts? How do you handle bugs in, I don't know, 100 deployed contracts? Who is going to do the administration? Similar topic like the topic of ownership. I mean, all of these three topics are overlapping, so it's not really a clear cut. And the topic of state synchronization. So how do we bridge the gap between the baseline, the asset off-chain, and the token which is on-chain? How to make sure that they are always in the same state?
So yes, so we basically presented the three pillars that we will successively address to try to answer the key questions. So what I propose now is that we move to the mind map. So again, as a reminder, because some people just joined us now, if you add any notes, please do as your initial here. We have already structured the note document for each session, so feel free to add. We will only have one group because there is 13 of us on the call, so please disregard this for now.
I will remove the other ones.
Yeah. Okay, great, thank you. And I think I will start the timer and we can focus on tokenization prerequisite. So just as a conversation starter, the questions that we are asking here is, if we already know that a certain document type or asset type will systematically be tokenized as part of the process. For example, in the invoice factoring use case, that all invoices or most invoices need to have a predefined process or agreed process for tokenization, so the token can be offered to investors. Can we identify core fields that, regardless of the record type, the document type, or the asset type, will always be needed? So from a baseline point of view, obviously. So any record that is baseline and subject to tokenization, do we need a set of required fields? Similarly, for metadata, we can think about, do we need to have a provision to be able to link this record to the on-chain token IDs, for example, because those two, when the token will be minted, we need linkage between the off-chain asset and the on-chain asset. So what I will do now, I will just, you can find this document on the slides tab here. So I will move it. So we won't be able to see it on screen because we will just focus on the, but please refer to it because it will be easier for the conversation. And we will just move to this. I have ready, yeah, and we can start the session. So from a data schema and metadata point of view, one thing that I was thinking about is, do we need to handle versioning of the record of the document? And if so, how are we capturing this, for example?
It's a good question. Why would you, depending on the use case, why would you need versioning for? If, let's say, you, in the invoice factoring use case, you have a prepared financing instrument, which was an invoice that was credit risk assessed, verified, and so on, and you would just present or create a token out of it, which is then for 60 or 90 days just there to reflect the ownership of potential investors.
Mm-hmm.
In that sense, you would not, in my opinion, need anything like that unless there is a need for upgrading or changes to the right. You're right. If you're talking about a different API that evolves in a company, you could have the old tokens that are still with the old version. So yeah, in that sense, yes.
Yes. So if we have a current version or previous version fields to capture, but similarly in terms of ID in a given system of record, if I think about Salesforce, an invoice record will have the business ID. So following the naming convention within that company, it will have the Salesforce ID as well. And do we need something similar as baseline ID? So if we have a token ID on chain, is it, and I'm just putting idea out there. So is that irrelevant? We just, push them away like but those are the type of data points that on the system of record we may need to consider. Because if there are any need for synchronization, post-update, or things like that, we may need to refer to them as well.
Just dropping in here. Hello,
yeah.
Stefan
Hello.
from Unibright, and also part of one of the baseline stories in the GitHub that runs that tokenization project. I think what's always important is to distinguish between the state, or if you talk about versions, that somehow ended up in baseline, and the outcome of whatever synchronized baseline state that led to a tokenization or even a token creation. So if we're talking about versioning after that, say we have a baseline invoice between two parties, then we start the tokenization process because we want to create a token that represents that invoice. And we are talking about different versions of that invoice because it's changed afterwards. I think this is a different topic than if you're talking about updates to the results, say the token itself. It could be that there are two scenarios basically: the underlying invoice that was the starting point for the tokenization changes, or the invoice, the baseline invoice stays the same, but you want to add a versioning on the tokenization itself. So just putting that thought out that we might have to distinguish between these two change versioning update scenarios here.
Yeah, that's a very, very good point. So my point was addressing the off-chain record itself. So it may be that it's not relevant. I just want to put it out there that if it's not relevant, we disregard directly. So one thing could be what happens if payment terms, for whatever reason, need to change, or if even the legal entity, because there were situations in the past where a company was incorporated in the UK, for example, and then the US company had to move up, and then the new EU became the new EU office became Ireland, and we need to reissue some invoices. Do we consider those type of very concrete business use case that could impact an existing record that has been baselined, but which will be subject to change or could be subject to change? Payment terms being like the most straightforward one. We've changed our bank account for whatever reason, we need to resubmit. So, and we could be that we say this is out of scope because it has too much complexity at this stage of the conversation. And we focus on critical fields or data points required for the tokenization process exclusively. Does that make sense, this context?
So
yeah, I think personally, everything makes sense. I just don't I don't have a sense yet if it's the first issue to talk about. If you, I think if this session leads to a clearer understanding what is actually the transition from the baseline record to a created token, then perhaps it's more obvious. For example, the payment terms example, what is due to potential changes.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, that part is, I think, covered with the state updates. So that's payment term changes is, in my view, a really exceptional thing when it comes, if you're talking about invoice factoring, and this is something that needs to be taken care of by the business logic and by the methodology of the company doing the invoice financing. And this, I would put it under the umbrella of the state updates between the baseline asset and the tokenized asset.
Okay.
When it comes to versioning, in the sense of you have a API of your token contract, which is a token standard, and then there is, I understood your question was going in that direction, and
yes.
Then you have a need to, for whatever reason, change the functionality, right? You want to introduce the functionality to enable whitelisting on your tokens. In that sense, it really has sense that you have a versioning system in place, which would, in my opinion, be an important property on the asset, so that you can actually control to what kind of API are you talking when you, when you have 1,000 token contracts in the wild.
Yep. Yep. Okay. I see that we have now Brian Marth on the call as well. Are there any input on your side, or David and Don? We have a couple of people.
There are questions on the chat, actually, on the Zoom chat.
Thank you. So the question is, could you clarify tokenization? It makes sense if you can sell the token, which in the use case define required investment. Is it anticipated that the investor banks will be a member of the tokenization work group, the baseline work group? That is a very good question. Ognen, do you want to take that one?
Yes. So if you take the case of, for example, invoice financing, the work group participants would be three parties. So you would have the supplier, the buyer, and the platform who is technically enabling the tokenization. But the people from whom you're taking the money, those could be funds or private persons, you would not then expect them to be part of the baseline workgroup. They would just come to a platform which is enabling them to invest their money short term in invoice factoring and financing. And they actually don't need to know that there is a blockchain behind it, right? That really depends on again, how does the invoice factoring or invoice financing platform wants to market itself. It's also not, yeah.
Yeah, no. So as a follow-up to that, wouldn't it be relevant to an investor or bank as to exactly what has been baselined? Wouldn't that be relevant information?
Yes, that's true. But that really depends on how does that platform, if you're talking about a platform who is doing invoice tokenization for invoice financing, how do they want to market it? What I see as a really good, what is the value of baseline in this case is that they can say, okay, this is verified because it's baselined, right? And then the banks or funds would be more interested to join. But if you want, that could also imply that you would need to have them as part of the work group so that they can verify the proofs. And then that introduces a number of business issues because your network for invoice financing would need to, all of these participants would need to have baseline infrastructure. So it really depends on the use case. On some use case, yes. On some use case, no.
Yeah. So could you give an example, Jen, like what would be baseline for a typical invoice? Like, would it be someone, one company saying we issued a purchase order and another company saying we issued an invoice, and then the company that issued the purchase order acknowledging that invoice? Like, just so I can get some context. Yeah.
Yes, you could think of it in that way. Let's say the supplier sends an invoice towards the buyer via baseline, and the buyer, the person behind the buyer system says, okay, we received these goods. So they say, okay, change the status, and immediately the status in both the system of record of the supplier and the buyer is green, or verified, however you want to call it. And there is proof in the contract, in the shield contract, that this transaction happened. And then you could have the invoice financing platform who joins the work group or has a work group where supplier would join, and it can look for that proof on chain to verify that really the buyer and the supplier have agreed on this invoice.
Okay, and if an investor group did, again, this sort of indirectly relates to data, but if the investor group wanted to make a claim because an invoice hadn't been settled for, they hold the token, would they have to do it through the supplier that originated the invoice, or could they do it direct? I mean,
that depends on again on the business case. If you're doing invoice financing, it's the supplier's job to take the payment. If you're doing invoice factoring, it's the third party or the factoring company who should then, if it's factoring with recourse, first should follow the buyer and then try to get money from the supplier if the buyer fails. Then if you have private investors who are actually participating in financing of those invoices, depends on their deal with the platform who is providing them the services. Who is taking the risk? Is the risk shared? Is it completely on the investor side? Is it completely on the platform side? It's really a huge amount of different use cases that could come out of it. The important point is that through the baselining between the supplier and the buyer, you get this additional value that you have a proof that something has happened, which is currently, for example, in factoring could be a source of fraud.
Okay.
That lends nicely towards cost distribution. So, sorry, cost. So who will be accountable? So because there are different, well, I guess it depends of the use case as well, but just as a reminder, the point is to say, can we find commonalities which are use case, which are not specific to use cases, where we can propose best approaches or best best process for the tokenization prerequisites. So I know, Ogden, you had some idea about how cost distribution will work for invoice factoring. So we can start by this, and yeah.
Yep, I was just thinking in general terms in two directions. One direction is that costs are shared, meaning that when you set up a work group, you will have some kind of a shared wallet, for example, that all the participants would need to fill up to a certain amount. It could be a multi-sig wallet, and the funds are coming in proportionally based on whatever is being tokenized. And the other option is that the initiator is providing its own money for doing the tokenization. Just in those general terms.
So is there a case where we could say that the factoring company, the third party, will incur the cost of the tokenization and charge a tokenization fee to the supplier? But it could be as well that for an other type of platform, the supplier will incur the cost of tokenization if that step is somehow,
Yes.
yeah.
Depends. I guess it depends on having the party in between. So if you have a factoring company or an invoice financing platform in between the supplier and buyer, they would probably, for their services, they would get a certain fee, and they would probably push the cost for the deployment of a contract towards the supplier, right? But if you have the supplier and buyer that are talking to a decentralized finance platform like Dharma protocol or something like that,
yes,
and you don't have anything in between, then I guess it could be the supplier who is initiating the transaction in order to get something out of it, could pay for the costs of the deployment.
Yes. Is there something to be said about predefining how the token owner will have access, if needed, to the off-chain asset? So if we have a case, for example, where we are not talking invoice tokenization particularly, but if we have a specific project requiring financing, as an investor, I will need to see a certain number of documents, right? So the investment details or the project details will not be anonymous or private in the same way that potentially invoice tokenization could be. So I think when it comes to authorization and permission, of course, it is use case specific, but what are is there any like standard or approaches that we can say there are two use cases, either the underlying off-chain asset, i.e. invoice, for example, should remain private. So we don't need to know who the supplier and who the buyer is. We don't need to know volume. We don't need to know. And second is we actually need full visibility. The investor needs full access. So those are the two things based on the use case that we have presented before. So my question is, in the second case where I actually do have, so there is a token out there as an investor, I purchase the token. What is the mechanism to give me visibility back or to linking me back to the off-chain record or off-chain document?
I guess my question was sort of tied to that. As an investor, I would think, because we're dealing with virtual assets, virtual tokens or digital tokens against sort of real world assets, I'd probably need as a prerequisite the acknowledgement from either the supplier and or the provider of the product or services that they will allow assignment of the rights under that digital asset, so that if something goes wrong in the real world, because I purchased a digital asset and financed it, I need the assurance that I guess the person buying the services will honor the invoice if it's held by a third party, and I'm just wondering where that fits into sort of the protocol. It almost needs like some sort of baseline recognition or acknowledgement.
So if I understood correctly, you are actually talking about the regulation part of issuing a token or a security, right?
Not really the regulation. I mean, if I'm going to buy a digital asset, right, and and worst case happens, payments aren't made, someone's going to have to recover against my security, which is a digital asset. So regardless of whatever regulation, because I'm sure every country has different regulation, I'm going to need some sort of proof that the provider of the goods, the buyer of the goods will honor the invoice if I hold it, right? In real.
Yeah, so I guess it's part of the credit check validation that the factoring company would do, right? And one way is, there are two ways really. As a factoring company, when I receive an invoice, I need to qualify it. So I need to check the credit score of the supplier, of the buyer. And your question is, as an investor, I want to have the certainty. So I need to have access to that proof. I don't want to trust that the factoring company, is doing, because I don't know their criteria to validate that this invoice is good enough to be presented to investor. So this is, again, putting that proof that this step of the process, which is credit check or credit score or credit risk assessment as well, has been done, and has been done by a third party. So now some factoring company may say, look, we have our own internal, scoring system, and we only rely on third party for credit risk. But in terms of setting the discount rate, so we do it. So investor may feel like, no, we want third party financial institution to kind of, risk assess and recommend best rate for this. So once again, this is a bit implementation specific because both can be done. If there is a need to do so, it can be by API or Oracle providing this risk assessment. So that answers your question. But all of this, once done, this can be part of the business rules that when we do this check, this step needs to be verifiable on-chain. So as an investor, I can access the proof that this credit risk assessment and credit check control has been done. So I have the certainty. Now, would that give you, the score itself? Those are different questions. But the proof will be there that it has been done. Does that address your point?
Yeah. I guess it's a bit more than that. I'm thinking I'm in Canada right now, right? So I believe in Canada, if a supplier delivers goods to a company and they basically have a registered claim on that good under Canadian law, it may be different in other countries, until that invoice has been settled. I guess I'd want certainty as an investor that those claims, which are legal claims off-chain, that they will be honored through the tokenization. So it's not just credit risk assessment.
Yes. Oh, you are talking about the legal structure, really, which is independent of the tokenization process, which is purely the technical things that happen to make you purchase the token at the end.
Yeah. This is something which is usually sold. So let's say there is this invoicing platform or factoring company, however you want to call it, and it offers through tokenization to its investors to participate in invoice financing. And the factoring company would have an agreement with each and every investor, which is the part of the KYC, AML, and the onboarding of the customer, to say, for example, your business model as a factoring company is that you can get better returns, if you go with riskier invoices. We will perform the credit risk and we will give you a credit risk grade that you can trust or you don't need to trust. If you trust, you will invest. And you are taking deliberately the risk that maybe this could fail and that you will not be paid. And for example, if they want to lower that risk for you, the factoring company could say, okay, let's tokenize this financing instrument or an invoice, and I will participate with X% and you will participate with Y%. This way, the company is showing that it has skin in the game and maybe can onboard or induce more trust into the investors. What's interesting with Baseline here is that you could actually you would have circuits which verify that something has happened and that the invoice has happened, that both parties agreed to it. And this is something that could potentially be also presented to the investor as a proof. But it really depends on the technical and other,
Okay.
know-how
No,
of
it's
the
less
investors.
that what I said is less of an issue if the supplier still has skin in the game, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
So we talked about authorization and permission of the option asset, but this is like really linked to the privacy requirement. So in the invoice factoring use case, the assumption, and correct me if I'm wrong, is that the asset attribute, i.e. the invoice details, for example, will remain private to the investors. Is that correct?
Yes, you would not want to share these business details with the public.
Not the public, the investor. So the investor
yes, I mean,
itself.
when I say public, the investors, yeah.
And as we said, in other use cases, such as project financing, this is the opposite. We need to share. So from a privacy requirement point of view, can we abstract any requirements? I mean, in terms of, again, we are focusing on the tokenization prerequisites, right? We are trying to identify if we can have a standout way, which is independent of use cases. And it may be that when we start, like as we are doing now, we realize, no, that's not the right way to approach it. It's either too domain specific or is it too use case specific? In which case, we are still doing very valuable work because we have identified that this is not a good candidate. Like the tokenization process from a baseline asset may not be a good candidate for a standard or a specification. So that, which is part of the work as well. So my question to you and everybody on the call is, okay, we have 15 minutes on that topic. So we have addressed cost distribution and we have said that depending on use case, the cost will be distributed differently. So there is no like standard way of distributing cost. We have also said that in terms of authorization and permission, the future token owner may or may not require access to the option or / underlying documents or assets. Can we discuss now privacy, security, and token standards to see if, oops, sorry, my bad.
So can I just say something on privacy?
Yeah, sure.
I heard you mention like different use cases, the project financing, the invoice. I think in both cases, there will be privacy requirements in the sense that if a group of investors is financing a project, they're going to want to see the information, but likely the people involved in that syndicate, including, the project sponsor and the investor group and the intermediary, are probably going to want to see the information related to the project, but outside of that group, they'll want it kept private.
Yes. So is it a case, and that's a question for everybody. So when the process starts, we have certain participants to the work group, right? Are we saying that once those investors, and this is only for the use case pertaining to the project financing, can we imagine that those new investors are now added to the work group for other workflows that come after the tokenization process, or that are part of the that come after, sorry, the tokenization process? Because if this is a prerequisite, yeah. Yes, go ahead, please.
Yeah, no, I was going to say, I think, the project syndicate will need to be a part of the work group because they'll want to see information that's available to everyone. But then, as I said, outside of that syndicate, you don't want to have all that information available to anyone on the blockchain, right?
Yep, yes. So it means that if we have a use case where one of the prerequisites that we have is that the underlying or the option asset need to be accessible to additional work group members, it comes with its own new set of business logic and all of those, because the assumption or the consequence, not the assumption, is that at some point we may consider that those investors want to baseline this record with their own system of record. Does that make sense? Yeah. So I will put, so the question, how do we capture this? Because this leads to new work group members added after, after tokenization process. Okay, why is it doing? Oh, I'm typing, but
You can just take the bottom left or right and expand it.
yeah, I was trying to do so, and
yeah.
After tokenization process, which could lead to new additional workflows. Okay. Should we talk about token standard support, which is linked to some extent to this? Yeah.
Maybe just regarding the privacy requirements, thinking in the direction, let's say that for whatever reason, your use case is that you're producing a lot of these token contracts. There is a bazillion of invoices that you're financing. But that could be sensitive, because if anybody knows the address from which you are working as an invoice factoring platform, they could say how much are you financing and so on. So in that sense, a privacy requirement could be that you hide the owner of the entity doing the deployments, for example, through I don't know, some kind of encryption or something like that.
Yep.
Or maybe just utilizing the blockchain features that already exist.
Yeah, I'll put it like this, and we can like fix it after. So that's fine. Yeah. Okay. Are there? Oops. Yes. Okay. Let's move to standard quickly, because it's a big part and we have 10 minutes left on this. So who is familiar with, I think you had note on this. Give me 2 seconds. Do you want to tell us a few words about the Diamond token standard?
Oh, you're referring to me, sorry.
Yes, yeah.
Yes, I was going to ask if anybody else has any token standards in mind that could be interesting for all the 3 use cases that we have, or maybe some other use cases that we didn't think of.
There is one that I found. Sorry, I should have. Oops. It's. Oh, sorry. I did something silly. I was trying to. Okay, good. If you go to the Epic for this, we have this confidential token standard by Aztec. So this is currently proposed. It's not. So that's one of the things that we could explore as well. So how do we maintain the token itself, like the token contract itself, confidential, or any other tokens that are part of the deployment? So the one that is a good candidate for consideration is definitely that one. So it defines as the standard interface and behavior of a confidential token contract where ownership, values, and the value transfer are encrypted. But it could be a good starting point to see how it can be either improved on that proposal or things like that. So I will have that one, EIP 7.
How would I see that if we would decide, for example, with the protocol to go ahead and have a kind of a tokenization service that can support standards? There is a number of them that would definitely need to be included. So Jack said ERC 721, for example, for the artwork use case, and in the cases where you have a lot of deployments, you could go with something like ERC 1155, which which is designed exactly for having a single contract and multiple deployments of a token greatly reduces the costs. So I could envision that you would have a service where you can actually, for when you're creating a work group or a work step, you could select from a number of implementations of token standards that are readily available open source.
So
yeah.
Yeah, sorry, I interrupted you. Carry on, sorry.
Yes, or have also an option to say, okay, we want to provide our own custom interface that's going to be our token.
Okay, so which one did you just say now? You said another one. So we have
1155.
1155.
Yeah, that's the multi-token standard.
Yeah. So what we can really see here is that there are not one best way to really tackle the tokenization prerequisite. And I think this will be the, well, we can take more time because it's just 15 of us, so we can carry on for another 10 minutes on that topic before moving to the other one. But, and please provide your feedback if you disagree or if you think that we missed like something very, very obvious. But it seems to me that based on the like session now, it wouldn't be the right approach to be prescriptive about authorization and permission, because we can see that they vary, about tokenization or token standard. One thing that if we do, well, we can explore further. I suspect that the privacy and the security requirements can be abstracted and applicable to all use cases, because I don't foresee any business use case where we would want to publicize who is doing the deployment and where is the money going. And so maybe we can take like 5-10 minutes to really think about more privacy and security related requirements, because all of these others, and I suspect this one is a bit of a hard one, and we might need to come back to it after we have done the tokenization process. So we can come back to it. But are there any other thoughts really about privacy requirements and security requirements as part of tokenization prerequisites?
Nothing comes to mind at the moment.
Yes.
Not sure if anybody else has something.
Oops, sorry, closed it.
While everybody's thinking, I would disagree with you in a sense that there, as I understood your point, you're saying that because there are multiple ways to attack this tokenization problem, it's not something that should be part of a standard, if I understood correctly.
No, not part of a standard. So if the question is
of a protocol, yeah.
Yes, is there, do we want to have must-have requirements on our baseline record should be tokenized? Based on just this session, it seems that it's a no. But again, we've just started. So it could be that we say that we would not have cost distribution requirements, but we could well have privacy. So one conclusion could be all of those components here are use case specific, cost distribution, authorization and permission token standards, but maybe some permission, privacy, and security requirements will be must have, regardless of the type of asset, regardless of the use case, and regardless of the industry. And I think this is where maybe the conversation should be going, to be clear on what is applicable regardless of use case and industry, and what what should be a must have. And I think we have identified mostly what is use case specific. So, yeah.
If you go back to the data question, so the first one topic that where we started, actually, you could think of something that is a must. It's just a link between the asset and the token, right? So you would need, every one of the tokens would need to have a field that identifies it uniquely back to the system of record of a baseline asset.
Yep. So this is how did we call this? We actually did capture that at some point. So it's a reference to the on-chain token, or basically, yeah. So reference. Oops. Similarly, on the ownership, we can think about like a legal entity. Could be like the legal entity, the legal address, you know. Is it things that we will need as part of the legal address? All the data points that show that this that a given company is a rightful owner of the invoice or the asset. Also, so is there anything else we can think about?
It's the token contract address itself. It has to reside somewhere in the system of record in a form, yeah, that you can always find it.
Right. Address.
Or even you could even think about having a registry for your all your deployments, right?
Yep.
Or just connect it to a specific asset off chain.
Token register. Basically, yeah. Token register that works as well. Put the version here. For some reason.
There is also one question in the chat: how to change ownership in a private way.
How to change? So you mean that if, as a supplier, I sell my invoice to the factoring company, how is it done privately? Well, the baseline protocol makes it by design private, because no off-chain data will be put on-chain. So once this happens, if this is part of, if this business logic is part of a like custom circuit, it will be done automatically. So my baseline stack will send a message, including the invoice, which has been serialized, to the baseline stack. Oops, sorry, this is telling me that we are done. Sorry, to the baseline stack of the factoring company. And the factoring company, after doing the check that we mentioned before, credit check, credit assessment, if approved, will send the message back to the supplier that is approved and can provide like, can release the cash basically. But this is independent of, blockchain, and this will remain private in all cases, because this is a bank account payment that is managed from the factoring company and the invoice, and the supplier pin of the invoice basically. So yeah, this is not a problem, and it's not. It's literally business as usual, I would say.
But it's a good question. I don't. Do you want to continue or make a break now, or what's your thought on it?
Please do address the question if you have something else to say, and then we can have a short 10-minute breaks and we move on to the tokenization process itself. And I think it will inform. We can go back to this to say, oh, but if we do this, then we need to add that. So please do address the question, and we take 5-10 minutes break.
Yeah, regarding the change ownership in a private way, I think the answer is, so let's say you have an investor who is selling his invoice tokens on a secondary market or something like that, and you, for whatever business reason, you want to hide that changing of ownership. And I guess this is also covered by the standard or proposal that you mentioned, where you would have a confident contract where the ownership is actually not publicly accessible. But I didn't look into this, and I'm not sure what's the level of development of this and how would it work. But
yeah, we can take some time, because we have in the other working session, we will address standard selection. So depending on how we are doing on time, we can definitely take some time and look all of us together and see if that's actually a good candidate or not. It's part of, the working session.
Cool.
So,
okay. Also, the transfer of ownership is going to be probably something you want in the data metadata, because you'll probably have some assets that are assignable, some that are assignable with permission of the issuer, and some that there is no assignment. Like,
yep.
If you understand where I'm coming from.
Yeah, I think I do. So I will, and I think we will definitely develop that further, because we have key working items touching on this. Okay, thank you, everybody. It's 03, well, 8:03 on my side. I'm based in London. So if we can come back in let's say 12 minutes. It's like at 15,
Okay.
depending on where you are. So I will keep that open and running, and we'll be back in 10 minutes.
Okay, thank you, everybody.
Yes, thank you. Okay, are you here, Ogden? I'm back. Nope, it's a nope. Hello, welcome back. I think we have 9, well, we had 7 and 9 people now back. So just, I captured the conclusion before we start. We'll give a couple of minutes to everybody else. The outcome of our first mini session was that we definitely need to spend some time thinking about the data schema, privacy and security requirements, because it's most likely that those one can be abstracted to a level enough that it's not use case and domain specific. And it could be that for data schema, most of the core fields will be related to capturing token ownership, data points, legal entity, legal address, as well as linkage to the token once it is minted. So reference to the on-chain token, the token contract address. And we have also mentioned capturing like transfer ownership. And I'm now asking myself if transfer ownership itself can be governed by business rules, right? If it's allowed, if it's not allowed, if it's allowed in what context. So that could be a good candidate to, it's definitely a good prerequisite item because it will be linked as well to token standard, right? Mm-hmm. To some extent. So I will put it here because kind of link to both. In some use case, we will definitely want easy transfer of tokens, art piece, for example. However, I don't foresee that if somebody or a group is working on a real estate project, that those tokens could have like this type of ease to transfer of ownership.
Yeah, the contract itself would not be, the ownership of the contract itself would not be transferred, but the ownership of the tokens could be allowed,
yes.
Right?
Yeah. Yes, exactly. So, and one thought that I add is that obviously there are many token standards that could be good candidates, but do we think that there may be one that could cover most use case, like standard use case? In the same case, when we have zero knowledge circuit, we can have a generic circuit for consistency check, right? It doesn't cover everything, but it's a basic, everybody will need that. It's part of the baseline fabric that it needs to exist. Do we think that there is some kind of very like standard token standard that could potentially fit that role, that most use case could start even with that token standard?
In my eyes, that would be a limitation. So if baseline wants to enable tokenization, then you could think about the audience of that tokenization being, I don't know, investor funds or private investors, or we can just call it public, right? Tokenization is usually open to the public. In that sense, you don't want to have a limitation on the use case that you would like to cover. So you would just use, you could think about it that in baseline, you could have a work step that you want to define, and part of the work step is, or the work step itself carries a specific token standard with it, and you would then just plug in the one you need for your business use case. But if you just have one, it's you throw away many use cases that are definitely legit and should be supported.
Yes, that's a very good point. So what we are saying is that many token standard should be, it becomes like a requirement or must be supported. And this is our requirement.
Yes.
Be supported. Oops, supported. Okay, what time is it? Okay, so I will start the timer for 45 minutes on the second session. And again, feel free to go back during the summit or after the summit to either add your notes or review those. Everybody can add as access and permission to edit those documents. Yep, it's now time. So I think we will do this. So as a reminder, we raise that to 45 because we are 9 now. So the tokenization process is a process by which a token is issued on the mainnet, and this token represents the on-chain asset, being the document or the record in the system of record. So there are really three main things that we should discuss. First, the token deployment steps, the technical architecture, and then the tokenization standard selection. So one of the questions that I had is, what should be the deployment step, and are they different if we do a one-to-one relationship off-chain asset to one token and off-chain asset to many tokens? So maybe we could either start by this, or we can start by any of those that you want. So then I'll put this back here and switch to the mind map. Okay, so we are starting here, deployment steps. I will actually ask, because I've seen that Joel, Melanie, and W.E. Perry, you have been on the on the call for quite a while. Would you like to contribute? Do you have any ideas that you would like to share with us? Actually, I don't see the chat, so yeah, question. Oh, we had
Hey, Anais, this is Melanie. For now, I'm just going to be an observer. I do have a bit of experience with Baseline through my my work at Ernst & Young before, and kind of contributing to the protocol maybe like 6 months ago. But I haven't touched it for a while, so this is just an opportunity for me to kind of refresh myself. So sorry if I'm not going to be very active today. If that's
no, don't worry, that's perfectly okay. As I guess if there is anything significantly wrong, you can tell us, like, oh, hold on. So yeah, that's good. I've just seen, sorry, I wasn't looking at the chat. So I submit as a point of asset tokenization is to create an integral instrument of value, such as instrument will have no. So for everybody, I'm reading a question that that is on the chat now. So is there in the sense of, if you have continued dependency on Azure, token can be tradable, for example, art use case. We have some very good questions here. How can an investor be sure that every token has an underlying physical asset? You are not actually tokenizing if your token value ownership.
Could you expand a little bit of that, W.E. Perry?
Or do you prefer to write? We can address, like, and you write. That's fine. That works if you don't feel comfortable doing so. So I think the point that you made was that if the token is linked to some system of record, we are not actually tokenizing. And I guess the question is, why do you think that it is the case? Because what we are saying is that all on-chain token are just linked to their underlying off-chain asset. And why does it not fit the description of tokenizing? I'm not too sure, to be honest. We are not saying they are dependent. Well, I guess maybe the challenge is, how do you define dependent?
In the case, for example, of the factoring, what you're creating a token which is based on a financial instrument, which is based on an invoice. And the added value for a factoring company is that because it's part of the work group, it's able to have a verified transaction between the two parties, one of which them is then asking for money based on that transaction, right? And then the tokenization is an extension to that, where the factoring company, for example, tokenizes in itself, in a sense that it gives its own investors possibility to participate partly in the financing of that invoice. So I'm not sure where does your comment, in which direction does your comment go that you're not actually tokenizing? You are tokenizing in a sense that you are digitalizing an asset and making it available partly to various audiences.
And yes, there was another point. A token can be tradable, of course, in the out of use case. And same for an invoice. It can be tradable. It's not. There is no restriction, and we are not really addressing that part. What we are saying is that there are different use cases, and that we should not be prescriptive. So in some use case, there must be liquidity, and the token should be able to be tradable, very easily. In other cases, it might not be the case. And the point here, and that's the point that Ognen was making, is that different standards can cater to different requirements. And we should not impose one token standard. In the same case, we can say that we can have NFT for art, but we can have, many different types for other, like we can have tradable tokens for other use cases. So another question, how can an investor be sure that every token has an underlying physical asset? And this is all of the value of baseline, right? Baseline ensures that the parties involved in the work group, if we speak in the for invoice, that the invoice has been, it's a kind of validated and certified that the consistency is there between party A, the supplier, and party B, my buyer. So this invoice exists. Now we are saying that there is a third party, the invoice factoring, which also has their set of all business rules subsequent to this process, but still link. So all of those proofs, part of the same workflow, are each verifiable. It's not one big proof that is on the blockchain. You can verify each step of the process. So if you are able to do so, you can trace back and verify that this token is linked to a verifiable asset. And all the tokenization process is not independent of the legal obligation of each company. That still exists. This is still, that's why I mentioned business as usual. So we are really talking about corporation, small, big companies operating under a regulatory and legal framework that does not go away because we are adding tokenization to their process. So this is what gives us certainty.
Exactly. So in the traditional, for example, invoice financing, the company that performs the financing would need to use various methods to verify that the underlying physical asset, in this case, the transaction behind the invoice, does exist. You would call the buyer to verify that there was the invoice, or you would do whatever method you need to do to verify that. Here, what you get with baseline is that because they are using because they're part of the work group that has a specific circuit involved, you know that if there is a status of the invoice in the supplier system, which is set to verified, you know that the same thing is in the buyer system. So then the factoring company just has another level of verification, right? That there is, you could still have fraud, of course. You cannot be sure, never, basically, but you have another level of verification. And same goes for the investor. If, for example, it is an institutional investor that wants to invest into bulk of invoices, financial instruments, it could be in their interest that they join a work group with a factoring company or invoice financing platform where they can see the proofs of the verification of the financing instruments that they're investing money into. This just gives them another layer of certainty, but it's, of course, it's never, you never can be 100% sure.
Yes, sorry.
There's always the missing link between the physical world and the digital world, which you just don't solve that with a token, right?
Exactly, and that lends nicely to deployment step. We could say that the first step before the tokenization, well, the first step of the tokenization process is to verify the identity of the entity that is triggering that process. So we want to ensure that whoever triggers the tokenization process is a rightful owner of that asset. Does that make sense? So I think it also addresses one of the points on how can we be sure that, there is an underlying physical asset and rightful ownership. So that could be the first step of the deployment process. So I think we have also addressed the point about different system of record might impose their own local interpretation. And the point is, no, with baseline, the rules, the verification rules and the business logic is agreed. Those are pre-agreed, pre-deployment. So we are sure that the different participants of the role group are aligned and in sync. They don't have different, it just cannot, interpret. That is the value added of baselining. We don't have different interpretation. We all agree and we all sign off on the business rules and what will be validated and when, and what does it mean for this thing to be validated and verifiable and then verified. So so if we go back here, so deployment step, and that's the one I mentioned, is before tokenizing the asset, verify.
I'm sorry.
Yes, go ahead.
This is Joel speaking. Sorry for being so quiet all throughout. I was actually trying to fix a computer issue on the side, but I just followed the conversation just now, and I just wanted to add some food for thought, and this might sound like rambling, so apologies for that as well. But if you look at the current world and how proof of ownership is registered, for example, when you have a house, I live in Switzerland, Zurich, so I don't quite know how it works in the rest of the world. But whenever you buy a house or whenever you transfer the ownership of a house, the only way you can actually prove that you own that house is if you have a notary countersign that, right? So I was always wondering, when it comes to these tokenized physical assets or tokenized artworks or tokenized real estates, if we could integrate the legal component or the, let's say, the notary that we already have, and they would countersign the ownership change, then you would have the same, I would say, the same confidence that the tokenized item that you are looking at is actually owned by the person that it claims to be owned by. And that could already add this like layer of confidence. Of course, we're adding in a somewhat of a waiting time because the notary has to be involved and he has to countersign it and it has to be part of the business process. But we can definitely replicate that source of trust with a tokenized asset. And that would, from my perspective, be really interesting. So the reason why I think this sounds like rambling is I'm not sure if this is too specific already, but is that something that's already part of the baseline spec?
If I can add to that, so when you're talking, for example, about invoice financing, you don't want to have the ownership public in any sense because you're revealing a business transaction that's happening. But if you're talking about owning real estate or something like that, that would be a must, right? Because that's the proof that you actually own in the physical world an asset. And one thing where baseline could actually be really useful, the protocol, is that the regulatory institutions could, for a specific let's say for a specific market or for a specific business in a market, they could propose a set of work groups that you need to be part of, and they could devise the circuits that are part of that work group. So in that sense, whoever wants to deal with selling real estate would need to be part of a work group, and the regulatory institutions would set up what are the business rules in that work group. And in that sense, just being part of the work group for a market entity would mean that it has to comply with certain regulatory practices, such as the real estate being notarized.
Okay, so that is designed for. But you just mentioned with certain things you don't want it to be public who owns the asset, and I guess with high ticket items that's particularly interesting because you don't want to get robbed, I guess. But
yeah, but you would sorry to interrupt. You would in a work group you would like to share that information. So the supplier and the buyer in the tokenization process of an invoice, they the interest of the supplier is that it gives all the information to the company that is going to finance its invoices for the sake of credit risk and so on. So in the work group, the information should be shared. But outside of the work group, when you do the tokenization towards the public, you don't want to share any sensitive information. You just want to share the link between that token and something that happened in the work group. And that's the proof that it represents that thing, that it's the same thing. And then if you go into the deployment steps, one interesting deployment step that would need to occur is that once the asset is baselined, before it's deployed, you would need again to have a circuit verification that says some business rule is fulfilled. In the case of invoice, for example, it could mean that the asset value in the system of records, let's say 10,000 francs, needs to be the same as the number of tokens that are minted, 10,000 amounts or tokens. So this is where you connect the outside world or the token with the baseline asset inside of our group.
Very interesting. So it seems like a lot of these things have already flown into the design then.
They are still, all of us are talking about it, and yeah.
Yes.
And one of the ideas of this session is actually to see if there is a real need for it, and yeah.
Which clearly there is. So to go back about having a second work group for regulatory purposes, and whatever proof that come as a result of a workflow being executed in this work group can be verified by another work group. So that step here of verification of asset ownership, as Ogden said, is we will have one work group with verification, and then as part of the second work group, which involves supplier, buyer, and the factoring company, for example, we could link to that proof to say, now you can check that I'm the rightful owner because this is certified by XYZ notary or recognized institute or whatever. So
can I add
yeah?
It's just not legal ownership, but also like for the project financing use case, you're going to want to validate that permits have been provided, you know, environmental permits and other issues that are associated with the project financing. So
yes, so I guess it's so it's not only so verify asset ownership, but then verify all the required, like what is the right word, like document
permitting. Verified. Yeah, I don't know. Yeah.
I will put permitting. I don't know. And but I'll put for future reference because I think oops. Verify permitting all documents, environment, etc. It will be easier to remember. Okay. Okay. Or yes, is there anything else? And I think we can move on to in terms of verification before the token is minted that we can think of.
So no, you would wait for confirmation on the blockchain, and you would then send back the information to the asset itself. So update the status of the asset, but that's more or less it.
Sorry, can you? So what's the step?
So I think that's more or less it. Once you have a confirmation on the blockchain, you would return that information back to the. You would store that information in the asset in the system of records, propagate that to all the parties involved. That propagation of state would be the last step in the deployment if it's successful.
Mm-hmm. Yep. So when we discuss about, well, we'll get a bit more technical now, but technical architecture and implementation options, which is somehow linked to token standard selection as well.
There is a question. There is a message in chat that duplication check may also be part of deployment, so to avoid same asset tokenized multiple times.
Yes.
It's a valid point. Yeah.
Yes.
There is actually an interesting use case there in factoring, where you have the issue that a company could request factoring in the same time for the same invoice to multiple different factoring companies. And then duplication check or a work group that's shared among factoring companies where they verify the hashes of the invoices that are being submitted just to check if there is a potential fraud. That's a good baseline. There could be a good solution. So yeah.
Yeah. So there is another point. Is it was asking what is your reason for token if your new system simply replicate? I think you are trying to make a point since a moment, but I'm not too sure.
I also I cannot
get
completely
it.
understand the question. So you are not replicating the existing dependencies. You're working on the added value which was provided by having a single source of truth between different multiple source separate silos of truth, so to say, right? So because the two parties, for example, use the open public shared database to say the state between our system is leveled, this gives you an opportunity to build on top of that value and then to, for example, tokenize or do whatever you want to do further on with that value. So it's not that you are replicating the dependencies, you are tokenizing a value which was created out of the baseline process, in this case, just aligning two systems of record, which gives you kind of a proof that the transaction happened. Not sure if I addressed your question, but
so sorry if we didn't, but yeah, that's the best we'll be able to do, I think. So in terms of the technical architecture, so we definitely will have an off-chain tokenization model, so a tokenization platform even. Then we have to think about the smart contract architecture. Could it be a case that we have a smart contract? Well, the tokens just mean that deploy themselves. So it's not, we have a contract like a token factory, if that makes sense. Where are we? Okay, here.
Technical infrastructure, right?
Yeah. So what do we think about this idea? So how could that be implemented in the context of baseline? So as a reminder, there is a shield contract that is in charge of, verifying, and well, the Merkle tree lives within the shield contract. So all the proofs is basically a proof is a leaf within the shared contract, etc., etc. We also have an org registry contract that basically capture all the participants within a given work group. And we have the verifier contract that interacts with the zero knowledge package as well, if I'm not wrong. So this is a current kind of smart contract list that we have in baseline. The question is now, when it comes to tokenization, are we leveraging those existing contracts? If so, how? Or is there a need to add other smart contract?
So I was in the talk earlier, and I think right now baseline is leveraging Nightfall, but I might be wrong in terms of like the verifier contract, the shield contract, and the Merkle tree.
Mm-hmm.
And we were talking about, their Ziki Snark versus Ziki Stark, and kind of being a zero knowledge proof independent. Right, so there could be different shield contract, or it could be modular, right, where the provenance and the minting process would not be Nightfall dependent the way that it is right now.
Yes, that makes sense. And that's why I was thinking that it could be a better idea to have a new contract, which is not currently part of any baseline reference implementation that are on GitHub that specifically address tokenization. So maybe the shield contract send a call to that contract that it's okay to do the tokenization with all the relevant information, and that contract will, mint the relevant contracts or tokens that are needed.
And then the only check would be that zero knowledge has been applied, and the minting would be, or like the tokenization would be in accordance with what baseline can accept, type of thing.
Yes, yes. So it will, let me try to, so what we are saying is that I might need to change this to somewhere. So we have our shield contract that holds the proof of all the baseline activities as ensuring that two system of records have been maintained in a state of consistency or any other things that we want to check. And we have what we can we call it the token factory contract. I don't know if that's the right
For
thing,
example, yeah.
Yeah. And we are saying that the shield contract will not be responsible for factoring, but, and then we have our on-chain, on-chain asset, which is our token, representing either the invoice, the art piece, whatever. So in terms of architecture, we will be adding, and I think here, to link back to standard and specification, I do think that this is a use case agnostic, and so that could potentially work.
Yeah, but there, somebody wanted to say something.
Yes. Where is the chat? It's in the.
I interrupted somebody, I think.
Melanie, was this you?
Yeah, no, it's a thing. I see. It makes a lot of sense. Thank you.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, that would be one approach where you have a token contract, I guess, token factory contract, sorry, that would be specific for deploying of one kind of standard or maybe even multiple standards. So after the shield contract verifies the circuit and stores that into the Merkle tree, the next step would be to just create a token. The other way could be that you have a separate service in the, for example, you have the privacy service, which is a part of the baseline infrastructure, so to say, that deals with the validation, the proofs. And you could have a tokenization service, or that, for example, implements uses the Nethermind client or whichever client to talk to the blockchain and to actually perform deployment.
Okay, so this will become
without having a centralized contract for creating separate token contracts.
Yeah, that makes sense. Maybe we can think about the advantages in terms of both security risk and the disadvantages of both. I mean, there is a clear advantage to have a tokenization service as part of the baseline stack. So, yes,
the question, for example, with the multi-token contract standard, 1155, the idea there is that you just once deploy the contract, and every other token creation is actually just a function call. And there you would not need, you just would have one contract that's always there, and right, you just trigger a function call to mint new ones.
Yep. So this will definitely be a good, if we do use one for this, like this. And the functioning code, yep. So if we, for the tokenization service, how would this interact with the ZK knowledge service and the messaging service exactly? So I've baselined my invoice. The proof is now on chain. What is the next step? And how?
So I guess you would utilize the privacy service, which you can talk to fetch the proof and verify it against the contract on chain just before doing the minting or something like that. I'm talking out of my head, not sure about.
Yes. Which is the purpose of. So we have our then knowledge proof that could verify all of those actually. That if we have the business logic in the custom circuit or whatever, depending on the use case. And then once this verification is done, oops, sorry. Yeah. Why is it doing this? It makes a call to the tokenization service that then, which is off-chain, just to make it clear to everybody. This is an off-chain piece of infrastructure. That's correct, right? That's what you had in mind. Okay. Off-chain. That then mint token. on-chain. Yep. So those are the two kind of from a technical architecture point of view. Yeah. Let me think about it.
I think the token standard selection part is actually covered by the previous session that we had. So it's something that could either be part of a, you would have it as a part of a work step. So it would be a deploy XYZ contract standard work step, right? Or it could be something which is a how do you say that? Something which is dynamic in a sense that the initiator would select which token standard is supported by the underlying infrastructure or implementation of baseline.
I guess the question about should this be a prerequisite or should we be able to do a selection, you know, not on the fly, but as part of the process is what are, if the business rules and what we need to verify and the way, the type of, the number of tokens and all of those things have constraints due to the use case. This should be a prerequisite and this should be kind of embedded, like predefined, I should say. So as part of a given tokenization process for a specific use case, the choice should not be given on what token standard to use. However, in other use cases, and it's back to my point, I think some of the constraints will require that we only use or we only rely on one token standard, right? And we should not have the choice, even if the protocol supports many, a given use case may need to restrict the use of the token standard. Which is why, from my point of view, I would say that we should remove this from tokenization process and only keep it in the prerequisite, because that will need to be decided upfront, regardless of the use case.
Yeah, usually the use case would, at least from what I can see right now, the use case or a work group would come around a single business use case, and that single business use case would be supported by a single token standard, which is the best fit for that. So it is something that is predefined, and then you just go with it for as long as the life cycle of the work group.
Yep. So in comparison to what we discussed earlier about the tokenization prerequisite, a lot of them being use case or industry specific, but maybe not data schema, privacy and security. And this is where we actually need to create or investigate further. I think that based on the conversation, the tokenization process actually can be standardized. So it's a matter of not what should be verified. Of course, verified asset ownership will always be there, but all of those other type of document could be very use case specific. So as long as first deployment step is verification of ownership, verification of XYZ, duplication check, etc. And then the subsequent, steps as following that route or that route. So I think I will already capture here that there is a sense that the tokenization process, when it comes to baselining, can be standardized. Do we agree? Yep. Okay. That's not the best, but anyway, we do with what we have. Tokenization process can be standardized. So we are saying we need to clearly identify required verification steps, and we know that it will include duplication, ownership, value as must have, other can be could have, depending on use case. We are also saying that, okay, can we spend, okay, let me check before I propose this. Oh, we have 10 minutes left. Can we discuss for 10 minutes advantage and disadvantage of those two approaches, please? So what could be a disadvantage of having a tokenization service? Does it remove any type of flexibility? What constraint does it add to the process, I would say? because we have already discussed the advantage, or the advantages, I should say. Also, we have questions on the chat as well, so I will just read them quickly. Sorry.
I think it's a discussion that it's parallel to ours.
Ah, okay.
I don't think you will have to read this in particular.
So, okay, from a standard point of view, in the same way we have requirements for the different components, so messaging service, the privacy service. Adding a tokenization service rather than having a token factoring contract means that interoperability, portability between baseline stack. So the implication of designing it that way means that in the standard, in the baseline protocol standard itself, we need to have proper requirements for this. So that's one of the consequences, which adds a level of constraints to whoever built baseline services and products. So tokenization service equal standardization, like OASIS, I mean standardization in core spec. Oops.
It also means that if you go, for example, for the tokenization services, you might lose some of the benefits of having your contract deployment being publicly available. If for whatever reason that's something that should be publicly available and provides another level of trust. If your token factory contract performs the same verification as the shield contract before it stores something in the blockchain, maybe that can be used as a benefit, right? So this is the way our tokens are minted. These are the conditions that are met, and this is the verification that happens, and then everybody can see that. So in that sense, yeah, the transparency is improved with a factory contract. But yeah, depends on the use case.
Transparency on tokenization rules, I would say. Tokenization. Yeah. So, and now the disadvantage of the token factoring contract. I think we have remove this. Sorry, my bad.
So the token factory would just point to existing contract, right? It wouldn't be kind of offering offering its own token contracts, right?
So what we are saying is this can be used for self-minting of the asset of the tokens, right? So the token factory will have all the required function and the shield contract will trigger the tokenization process.
Okay, I see.
Yep. So yes, correct.
That would be kind of minting existing contract, existing token on.
Or actually deploying a new token contract.
Oh, okay. I see. Thank you.
Yeah. Yes, I think we have 6 minutes. Is there anything from a tokenization process point of view that we have not been addressing, and that is like a high-level core thing that we actually need to discuss? I think implementation options.
Covered,
yeah. Exactly. So anyway, when we clean all of this, we will make it all make sense and do it a bit better. So is there anything during or post-tokenization process that needs to be baseline? So when the token has been released or minted, do we want to send back some kind of confirmation? Yeah, actually we do. We want to go back and have either in the metadata, because we said that we want to reference the on-chain token ID or the token address. So part of the process, so we'll have verification, deployment, minting, So So how can we capture this? This is basically saying, how would that work, Ognen? So the contract.
If you're talking about the state update after the.
Yes, state update to the off-chain record to link.
Yeah, that's a good question. If you're off-chain talking about the tokenization service, I guess it could just be part of a work step, right? So it waits for the update coming from the blockchain that the transaction was confirmed, and then based on that, it just updates the system of record. If it's on-chain, the contract itself, you would not expect it to. It could just throw an event that needs to be listened to again by the tokenization service. That would definitely need to be there, but it just depends if it's going to do the actual token deployments or not, or just going to do everything else related to that activity.
Okay, so if we do,
you would expect that there is a service who is listening for blockchain events, such as it's the same thing that you have when when the Shield contract stores a new leaf, a state change.
Yeah.
There is an event thrown, and you listen. Your baseline infrastructure is listening for that event, and based on that, it updates the system of record of the initiator, and then depending on the work step, that system of record could send via baseline a message to the counterparty saying, okay, the operation was successful, and then the other system of record would update itself based on that.
Yeah, so we are saying we listen, we get the confirmation that our token has been successfully deployed. This is captured by our baseline stack, which then sends it back to the system of record, which updates the metadata with a relevant link to the contract and the token ID. So now, if this is done via the token factory, would that go straight back to the Shield contract then?
But you would again need an event coming from
Yep.
It's the same thing. So you would definitely need some kind of a service who is at least listening for tokenization events, let's say.
So what in the current stack, in the current reference implementation, what service is doing that? Is it the blockchain client? What service is capturing this currently?
I'm actually in the provider implementation. I'm actually not sure what's the name of the service. We need to check. But
okay.
I know we called it notification service through the. But I mean that's not the name of in the implementation.
Okay. Actually, I want to show Ognen a question. The work that we have been working on for the high-level process, are you comfortable if I show that now to just put back some context about the invoice factoring?
Yes, sure.
Yeah, sure. Okay. Just give me 2 seconds, everybody. I need to find the right file. Because we are heading toward the end, so okay, where is the invoice factoring? Okay, oh, sorry, wrong screen. Are you able to see my screen, everybody?
Yes.
So let me have a quick look because this is still a work in progress. So that might not be the right one. I think this could be the right one. As I said, this is work in progress, and I will tell you what is not correct.
There is a sheet named good one. Maybe it's that.
No, actually, it might not be. Believe me, I'm weird like this. Yeah. So no.
Yeah, we can go with the first one, I guess.
Yeah, we can go with the first one. No, let's go with the first one. That's the thing when you're working on too many things at the same time. So what we are seeing here, my bad, is a process workflow for what we have been discussing. This is draft. So as you can see, we have our key actors involving that. Oh, sorry. We are done with our 45 minutes. Okay. You don't hear it, but I hear it very loudly on my side. It just starts screaming. So we have our key actors of our role group. So we have our supplier, we have the buyer, we have the factoring company, and we have the credit risk assessment company. Alternatively, we may or may not have the tokenization platform as well. And what we are saying is that once a supplier takes the decision to factor an invoice, the record itself, the invoice itself, or the request itself is serialized. Then it is sent to the messenger service of the baseline stack. So as a reminder, we have messenger service, zero knowledge service, privacy service, which is a zero knowledge service, etc. Send the request to the factoring company. So as you can see, the factoring company has its own baseline stack. And the way the protocol has been designed, it doesn't need to be the same stack because the API and everything should be interoperable. So two companies providing baseline services or baseline products will use the same interfaces, so they will be able to talk to one another.
Yes, one company could have its own implementation of baseline based on the protocol standard.
Exactly. So, and similarly for the messaging service, there is no prescription that you have to use NATs. Or I remember Radish 34 use Whisper. You don't have to use that. So this is to the choice of the implementation in question. Then we are saying that within the baseline stack, the messenger service send a message to the ZK service. And that the ZK service, is this a good one? Yeah, that might not, yeah.
I think you can go with it, yeah.
Yeah, kind of good. Send a message to the system of record. So assuming this is ERP SAP, assuming this is, I don't know, CRM Salesforce. So the factoring company deposit the invoice into their own system of record. And then through an API can request a credit assessment to be provided by a credit risk assessment company. There is an alternative where we say, oh, can we baseline even with a credit risk assessment company? You can baseline with any party as long as they are part of the role group. So if there is already this infrastructure in place, this could be a totally viable implementation option. Baselining could also be a viable implementation option. So the credit risk company send back the result to the factoring company. If the rating assessment is good enough, then it goes through the API path. If not, a request is sent automatically by the messenger service of the baseline stack to the messenger service of the supplier side stack, and that's it. The request is rejected. The API path is that I inform my supplier that needs to inform basically the buyer that now you need to update your payment terms because the invoice has been sold to a factoring company. Only when the factoring company receives acknowledgement, for example, from the buyer, or even, as you can see here, the buyer confirm updates. So the buyer has his own baseline stack again. So all of the three parties involved in the role group need to have their own baseline stack. Then the factoring company, after receiving the confirmation that payment terms have been updated, so now I'm entitled to receive payment for that invoice, then they can trigger the tokenization process. And what we have been discussing over the last two sessions are, how does that process look like? What is the prerequisite to trigger this? What are the token creation parameters, etc., etc. So I hope it helps. This is just to give you like a bit of the background behind the track. So I'll go back here. So I think we are okay for the tokenization process. So we have discussed first at high level, what are the prerequisites to how does the process look like? And now the the topic of governance. So I will go back to the Google file first and stop. So when talking about token governance, the 3 items that we really want to get into are: how do we manage contract upgrades and bugs? How do we manage all administration or administrative side? So whitelisting, somebody mentioned transfer of ownership during the first session. And how do we tackle state synchronization between the baseline asset and the token? So what time is it? I think we can go for 45 minutes on this. I will reset. And then that will be the end of the formal sessions, but then the track will remain open for those who wants to. So that will be our last hour, basically.
I would just need to jump out for 2 minutes and I'm back.
Yes, sure, that works. Do you need a break, everybody? Do you want to have 5-minute breaks, or are you happy to carry on? Please let me know by raising hand if I can see. If you actually, sorry, hold on a moment. I cannot see the list of participants. Yeah, please do raise hand if you want 2 5-minute breaks. Okay, nobody's raising hand, so we carry on. Yeah. So token yes.
One thing. So me and Mr. Perry here in the chat did have actually a pretty interesting discussion. Whenever whenever we represent the things of value in terms of tokens, and then we have to assign certain business logic to that token. So whenever it changes, that the value is also updated potentially. But however, over time, things of value and the things that impact it can change.
Yes.
And you need to be able to upgrade that circuit according to those changes. Did Baseline already try to architect for these upgrades in the circuit logic? And how is that upgrade structured? Or is there also a facilitation of having a community governed upgrade of that circuit structure?
So I will take that one, but Ognen, please correct me if I'm wrong. So the way it works is prior to executing a workflow, all the business logic should be agreed and defined and agreed by all parties. So either there will be a generic circuit or a custom, most likely at that point to be a very custom ZK circuit. So your question is, how do we handle upgrade of that circuit? So if business rules are changing, the logic would be that all parties need to come together. The challenge is for workflows or records or documents that have already been baseline based on the prior version of the circuit, what would happen to them?
Yes.
And for now, we have not been part of the conversation to actively address this the circuit upgrade. So
Kyle and Kartik would be great for answering this. What I know so far, I don't think this case was handled currently. The idea with the privacy service that's being implemented at the moment and designed and implemented is that you as an initiator of a work group could push a specific set of circuits for all the participants. But yes, if you have baseline assets which were based on a previous version, I'm not sure.
And what would be the way of achieving this? By just creating a new
sorry?
Would you have to create a new asset and a new circuit?
I guess yes, that you would have a state until some time, and then you would have a new rules how to govern or how to achieve which business rules needs to be applied from now on to these specific assets. But it could be hard to retroactively try to fit already baseline assets with a new business rule, right? Because it could be impossible.
No, I don't. I also don't think that's particularly necessary. Whenever there's a change in the way we, handle the asset from a business perspective, then that needs to be factored in for all the subsequent assets that are created. So that is already solved for, or that is also not necessarily yet fully thought out.
It's not so. The mechanism, high-level mechanism, would work that you could push through the messaging system in your workgroup. You could push need for through the privacy service to update the circuit, and this would be done, I guess, either from the initiator of the group, for example, if it's a regulatory institution, or through some form of agreement. This would update the circuits for in each and every baseline implementation of every participant, and then the new rules would be involved. But I cannot tell more than that. That's really just high level.
Yeah.
And I think the work there is not progressed too much. So that's a good point for if you're interested in that and can support there. That would be, I guess, great help. If you want to get more information about that, the best persons are Kyle Thomas or Kartik Salipuram, it's
Yep.
pronounced. Yeah, so
yep.
you can approach them today or tomorrow to ask more.
Okay.
Yes, definitely the topic of debasing and rebasing, it's linked because while you were speaking, I was thinking, if I have a new circuit and some of my records have been baseline, do I just rebaseline based on the new business rules? And doing like, or from a, this should be straightforward because one record can be subject to many different workflows, right? In theory, I don't see why this could not be done. Now, the implication will be, how do I ensure the synchronization? If I do that from at a system of record level, what is the impact on the assets that have already been, put into the assets, the on-chain assets that have already been created? And this is, I guess, what we wanted to capture in a way by state synchronization between the off-chain asset and the on-chain asset. So we can start by this. I think ownership is very important as well, transfer of ownership and things like that. So yeah, we can definitely start here.
Sure.
So I will capture your point because it's still very relevant.
I'm also adding it to the page, to the notes for.
Oh yes, thank you. Circuit. Sorry, circuit. Yeah. So just to confirm, upgrade and bugs, we are focusing on contract upgrades, not circuit upgrades. That's why I put that here. Yeah.
Yeah, regarding the upgrades and bugs, one of the, while thinking about the use case and the work that Anais showed to you, you could have a situation where you're an invoice financing platform and you have 1,000 separate tokens currently online, right? And then there is a realization that there is an issue, and somehow you need to push an upgrade. And the idea here was to talk about any experiences or ideas how could that be handled efficiently.
Yeah, and who is accountable as well for this?
Yes, the accountability part, it's not something that baseline can solve, right?
Definitely not. But it's good to mention it. Yeah.
So not sure if anybody had any experiences with tooling that could, or implementation options that could help with issues like that. What came into mind during the discussion coming from Andreas was the diamond pattern, which is a pattern for deploying or having a contract that can have some responsibility that can be modularly exchanged, let's say. So the diamond basically holds a map between the calls or its external functions and the separate contracts that are going to perform those functions. And then you can just modularly remove or exchange functionality just by changing entry in a map.
Like abstract classes.
Yes, something like that. And diamond pattern supposes that there is just that one contract that then controls a full set of contracts that are below. and that came as one option to try to quickly, let's say, I mean, more efficiently deal with these kind of issues.
So is it that we would add to the baseline infrastructure some kind of maintenance contract, if we can call it like this, that would follow the diamond pattern?
For example, yeah, that's one. That's fun.
Yeah. So the exclusive object, like role of this, would be to care for the maintenance of all the other maintenance kind of contract. Yeah. Oops. So is it the initiator? Sorry, is it the initiator of the work group who would deploy this?
Yes, I would guess that once you trigger the core API to deploy the shield contract and that stuff, you would also then have already a decision how do you want to approach this, and you would that would be deployed together with the full workflow. And it could serve as a facade, so between your contracts. For example, if you have the token factory contract that has an issue, you would just exchange that mapping in the diamond contract, and then you would use a different one further on for deploying the contracts.
Yep.
And your token contracts could be written in a way that they also follow the diamond pattern. So all of their functionalities, for example, your diamond pattern could have a mapping of, let's say, balance of implementation, transfer implementation, regular ERC20 functions that are actually just separate contracts that can then be modularly exchanged.
Yep.
In case that there is an issue or a need for an upgrade. It further complicates the implementation in the beginning, I would say, but could later on allow for easier upgrading, and it would be necessary, I guess, only for specific use cases where you really go with a lot of deployments, a lot of contracts.
Yeah. Yes, that makes sense. Sorry, I'm just catching up because there was some conversation happening in the chat. Oh, okay. It's still sorry, still ongoing. Oh, sorry. Yeah. It's a parallel track. I was trying to ensure that we're not, like, if we're addressing everybody's concern, but I think we're all good. I think we're all good. For token ownership transfer, so we did say that this would be part of the token standard support. So we need to ensure that.
Yes, I think we
have. I'm just in terms of token governance. Let me just.
So I think we covered it to some extent there in the prerequisites.
Yes, exactly. So when it comes to really focusing on governance, we would want this to be taken care of. Actually, we can just add this here that took to some extent, and we did say that those overlap. Token governance should be.
But yeah, if we go to the third one, yeah, the ownership exchange, it could be useful to talk about it in a sense that you could have multiple parties, and they could agree to have a single owner or could have multiple owners, but they would need to have a mechanism in place how to change that ownership, and that could be done through some kind of multi-sig transaction. We expect that a number of parties would allow for the transaction before the ownership is changed, or some kind of an implementation in the contract that would require that multiple parties agree before the ownership is changed.
Yes, but then can this not be done at circuit level again?
How do you mean at circuit level?
Let me think about this. So we have one token owned by many parties. The main owner, would there be a main owner? First of all, let me ask a question.
So let's say that in the example where you have the construction companies deploying a contract and they agree between themselves because it's easier for whatever reason, the owner is one of the companies, right? The administrator of the tokens or something like that. But they do provide a mechanism that this administrator can be changed for whatever reason, right? Somebody loses the key or something like that. And in that sense, that there is a mechanism in the contract that if there is 3 of the companies, 2 companies could decide to change the owner, or all 3 of them, or whatever.
Yes, I understand.
I think that multi-sig transactions there could be additional if you want to have that kind of support.
Yep.
I think this goes in line with administration. Sorry.
So why I was thinking, I was thinking about the legal, component as well, right? Which is like, from a business point of view, whatever happens there is a reflection of changes happening off-chain, right? Which is why I was wondering, all of those change of ownership will be documented and by formal or legal documents first. That's what I was trying to understand. If we define business rules, again, those can be baseline, because if for project financing, we have at the beginning 5 investors, and for phase 2 of the project, I don't know, 1 investor withdrew because this is allowed within their clause, for example, it means that this document itself that was baseline is now amended and now updated, right? That makes sense from a use case point of view.
I didn't manage to follow it fully. Not sure about the others. If you could repeat.
So let's forget about implementation. Let's talk about business as usual. There is a project with many parties agreeing to finance this project. There are many phases to that project. It is not said that all of those parties are fully committed, that there could be a clause where after a certain phase of the project, I can remove myself as a party, right? This change affect previously baseline document, right? Or they are just like amendment or other things. So I was trying to understand if this mechanism is managed through baselining of record with a circuit. If there is a change XYZ, then we need to verify, then we need to put this proof on chain. What is the implication of managing ownership of the token? Like how those two link together. So I understand from a technical point of view, this is like how we will do it, but how do we link? And this go back to state synchronization a little bit between that change into the, I would say, the off-chain world to that change in the on-chain world. Yeah.
Yes, if you're looking at ownership as a state change from the system of record, it depends. Yeah, it depends if the token ownership is actually connected with the state in the system of record, or is it something in the specific use case which is completely separate, right? If you have a work group that has 3 construction companies that deploy the token, and they are the owners of that token, or one of them is the owner, and then out of that work group, one party leaves, do you need to do anything with the token?
Yes. Yeah. So this is definitely use case specific. I agree with you, but I still think that there should be a mechanism. So not only to rely on this, which is very good, but that should address this state synchronization as well.
Yes, but in this use case, the ownership is not represented by the state of the system of record, but by the state of the work group or participants in the work group. They are the owners. So
yes,
I'm not sure if you could.
No, I see I clearly see the difference, but the list of investors or people contributing to a project could be in the system of record on a given document, right?
Yeah, that's true.
So that's what I was trying to say, that in the same way, in our data schema, we have legal entity, legal address. The only difference is that if there is single ownership, we'll have one entry. If there is multi-ownership, for each entity, we will have either it's a person or is a company, we'll have that, right? So there is a direct link between this and this here.
Yeah,
that's what I'm saying.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. So depending on the use case, this part of ownership could be tackled by administration, and that's why you need administration, because you cannot propagate that state because you don't have it if the ownership is not stored as data in the system of record. So, and also ownership in a separate use case could be a part of a state propagation. That really depends. So,
So I will capture here that what we really need is a definition of ownership and the scope of that ownership, because it can be, we approached it from two different perspectives and both are valid. So when we carry on the work, we need to clearly define, what ownership means in that context and what ownership, means in that context and how those are linked. Sorry. So define and differentiate ownership. I should just say define ownership. So ownership, I don't want to say as state because this could be confusing. So I will just leave define ownership now. And when we'll get to it, I will make it more clear. I need to think about what is the best way to phrase it. Okay.
So related to the state synchronization, I didn't follow fully. The question was the circuits, right? And the other topic is the how do we, there is a change in, let's say the token is open for secondary market trading. So the investor sells and there is a change in the ownership that needs to be reflected in the system of record in the workgroup. So how would we handle that? How would we synchronize back that state?
So the first, so the first owner before the token went to the secondary market, in what we could say is in addition to token contract address, reference to on-chain token or tokens, because one off-chain asset can be divided into multiple tokens, right? Depending on the use case. So we need some kind of registry, it feels almost like, for ownership, like, token ownership.
I'm not thinking just about ownership. Let's say for whatever reason there is a state change in the token that needs to be reflected back in the system of record, right? Somebody burned the tokens, so now you have less of them, and this needs to be reflected. What would be the mechanism to send that back? We would, we'd probably need to again.
Yeah, that's what I mean. Does it need to be something different from what we have in terms of messaging and everything?
So in the sense of circuit verification, when you propagate to the blockchain or to the token, you always have a circuit which is verified that the business rules have been fulfilled.
Yes.
If you go back, do you need something like that, or you don't need because it's already public?
That's a good point, actually. Yeah, it will be better to have this captured. I mean, first we have to check that there is even the authorization to burn the token, right? So that will be the first verification step. Is the person requesting or triggering?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I'll put that. So this, sorry, where would you put that? That's not owner.
I think that's the state synchronization or state propagation, but between from the token towards the system of record.
Yes,
And
yes, I understand.
is there a need for a circuit to be there in place also to verify that, yeah, what happened was legit?
Yes, yes, definitely. So we are saying that we need circuit verification. Yeah. So basically, we need business rules that include all the state change of the token. So those need to be thought of in advance. So new token, token transferred, token burned, right?
For example, yeah.
Yeah.
I'm just thinking out loud. I'm not sure if it would be needed because, right, you would have it on a already in a smart contract, meaning that these are the business rules under which this can change. So coming back that state through an event, coming back to the system of record, do you need any kind of proof before you update the system of record?
Yeah, I understand. I'm capturing. We are not saying that this is required, but at least we need to think more. We won't decide anything today. It's just like brainstorming. Yes. Yeah. So it's okay. Don't worry. So I think we need to think what would be a good use case for which we would want to have that back in the system of record, even for invoice tokenization. Why would you want it? What is the added business value of having this information back in the system of record? Is it for audit purposes? Is it for, I don't know.
So yeah, you want to have the state, right, between the parties. You want the state to be the same. And if there is a functionality in the token that enables the state to be changed outside of your control for whatever reason, you want that state reflected back in the system of record because they're not in sync anymore.
Okay, so that's a perfect non-use case specific, use case agnostic.
Yeah.
Yeah. So okay, so we have our answers then. So we say circuit. No, basically, I will copy paste this and deal with it after because that's a big one that I think we actually need to think more about. Oh, sorry, did I? Yeah, okay, that's fine. We're all good on time. Is there anything else? We have Kyle. Oh my God, Kyle, are you on the call?
Oh my gosh, I'm here.
Hey, Kyle.
For how long have you been on the call? And you're not contributing. Not good. Not good.
Well, what I do? Wait, what I do?
We have.
What did I not do?
Your timing is great. We have a question for you.
Oh, okay.
I think Joel, do you want to?
I did come at the right time.
Yes, exactly.
Yes.
So you don't want me to leave?
No, you stay. Thank you.
Joel, do you want to go ahead and ask or?
So in the chat, I had a conversation with some of the other participants, and one thing that is fairly obvious is that whenever we have some type of asset represented as a token, and we have a circuit that is sort of governing some of the business logic that is impacting that token, it could be that we need to make adjustments to that circuit at some point. And how is that currently being looked at?
Okay. Yeah. So that's a great question. I mean, the concept of an upgradable smart contract is sort of one way to look at it. The nuances around upgrading the circuit itself is something that I personally haven't gotten to yet. I think it's possible. To upgrade it, but there's probably a lot of implications there that essentially would require you to nullify. You would probably have to exit, for example, the older version of the proof, like the version that you're upgrading from. I don't think those proofs would be valid anymore. Possibly You could come up with a scheme though to make them valid in another context. All right, TLDR, like it needs some research, but you can upgrade a smart contract. So I think it can be done, but we're not quite there yet.
See, well, if you have, we also spoke about the diamond pattern and to have upgradable smart contracts, but does that also apply to circuits?
No. So like the diamond pattern will apply. Like we'll be able to upgrade the shield contract, which will like the verifier we'll need to replace the verifier in the shield contract with the new circuits verifier.
Yeah,
that's going to invalidate all of the previously valid proofs, which means we will have to exit those. We are looking at exiting. We're looking at how to exit a work group, for example, like when a process reaches finality, how you might exit from one work group to another. We are looking at that, and to me, this is just like a variation on that. But it's complicated. It's complicated. I think it would work similarly to that use case, though. For example, what I mean by exit is a business process is completed, and you want to tokenize. You want to know, like, you want to basically mark the state of that process, that workflow as finalized, and then take the proof and quote unquote generate an exit proof that wraps all of the previously valid proofs that have been quote unquote exited that are or that process is finalized, and then use that exit proof as the input to another work group, the circuit on another work group. So I think the upgrading a circuit would be a variation of that.
Interesting. Could it be just like a fork where all the previous assets are just left intact, and from now on you're applying a different set of rules?
Kind of. It is kind of a fork, but if you don't have a way to like mark it, but now like exiting is sort of like a fork, but you have to mark it somehow, so that the other participants can recognize it. You know, it's easy. Like when a chain forks, you know, it's no one really sees the fork. Everyone just thinks the chain is accurate, but you know what I mean? There's two chains. But in this case of like, there's real money involved on a tokenized invoice, for example, all the parties need to know, like, deterministically that one has been exited and upgraded.
Yeah, that would be really
you can't really fork an invoice, otherwise you're just printing money.
While it's active,
you have to finalize it somehow, which is to me doable in the context of what we're talking about here.
Is there some way to follow the progression of that research?
I mean, I think you're onto something with the diamond pattern. I mean, that's something that we need to do immediately, and it's something that Andreas and I and Karthik and others have talked through already. Joe, I know you have, you know, a lot of good insight and direction there. So if you'd like to help with that initiative, I would say now would be a great time to look at that.
Cool.
Yep. So basically, the shield contract itself needs to implement the diamond pattern, the workgroup shield contract. Because each workflow will be each workflow will have an upgradable verifier contract associated with it.
Took note of that.
Yeah. Okay, because we have, thank you, Kyle, very much for this, 20 minutes left. What I propose is that we go through what we have discussed, and we either agree or disagree on the conclusions, because we had people back and forth, and some people have since the very beginning, but some people like Kyle just joined now. So during the session, the 3-hour session, we discussed tokenization prerequisite, tokenization process, and token governance. One of our conclusions for the tokenization prerequisite is a lot of those requirements will be use case specific and industry dependent. However, we definitely need to spend some time working on the data schema and metadata. So field or key data points such as legal address, legal entity, token address contract, reference to on-chain token IDs, those can be implemented from a baseline point of view and should be most likely be required regardless of the type of asset, type of record, etc. Similarly, on authorization, we said that it depends on the case of invoice financing. All off-chain data should remain private. However, for our project financing, we saw that investor would need to have access to the underlying off-chain asset. So this is most likely to be use case specific. Same for cost distribution, most likely to be use case specific. However, we need to spend some time really looking into privacy requirements, security requirements, which are most likely to be standardized. Like we can probably standardize those. So, and I take the time to raise that because it could be that when it comes to post-summit work, including the hackathon, we could have things linked to those items.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
So yeah, we take note. On the token support standard, the only requirement is that many token standards must be supported. It will be use case specific if one or more token standard must be required. So here we cannot specify as part of the baseline standard that we cannot dictate what token standard should be supported. So that's it in terms of tokenization prerequisite. And I ask for those who have not participated to that session before, are there any red flags or like key missing items that you think should be addressed or should have been addressed as part of the tokenization prerequisite conversation? Okay, I'll give a couple of seconds so we can read. Okay, I think it is a no then. The second session, we discussed the tokenization process itself, and it's very clear that the tokenization process as part of the baseline protocol can be standardized. So we probably spend some time working, not probably, we have to spend some time thinking about that. We need to clarify, we need to clearly identify what are the must-have requirements for verification. We have already identified asset ownership verification, duplications check, and asset value. So those are the three must-have. Everything else can be should have and are use case specific. We have also discussed 2 implementation options, either having a chill contract, sending a call to the token factory contract to trigger the tokenization process, basically. Or we have a new tokenization service as part of the baseline stack, where we will have the privacy service sending a request or call to the tokenization service to mint the token. And then we will update basically back the system of records.
Tokenization service is probably a must, at least for listening to on-chain events and reacting to them. And then it's only a question if it should also take deployment responsibility or leave that for the token factory contract.
Yep. So I will put here a tokenization service could deploy. I will rephrase that later. It's just for could deploy tokens or token contracts. And same, yes?
The question, just a question, duplication check, meaning the duplication of the tokenized assets representing the same off-chain asset?
Yeah, we want to ensure that, for example, in case of invoice tokenization, that this invoice has not been tokenized yet.
Okay. What do we do if we do find duplicated on-chain assets?
If we do find them,
yes.
Well, risk zero doesn't exist, and I think this is part of what we need to cater for. What?
But a duplicate asset.
If something fails, or if there is fraud, which is, we can never bring fraud to zero, I guess. An example could be a supplier sends an invoice factoring request to two tokenization company, a factoring company, sorry, which are not part of the same work group, so they cannot check between them, if they have received the same request. What happens?
That's where exiting, I think, comes in.
Yeah, exiting. Yes.
You're saying that the work groups can't talk to each other, right?
Assuming, no, we know that they can talk, and it's not a problem if they can talk, because we'll have one work group with all the factoring companies ensuring that there is only one, request for a given invoice. However, if a given factoring company is not part of that work group, what do we do? I guess that's a question.
I mean, it can even be further simplified, that you could have a bug in software that allows for another initiation of tokenization of an asset that's already been tokenized for whatever reason, and then the duplication check would come as a sanity check to verify that this thing does not exist based on some predefined
that's the
set
exit
of parameters.
No, it's just the presence of the exit proof indicates that the token has exited and terminated from one work group, and
even in a single work group, you don't need to have. You can have a duplicate in a single work group.
Well, I don't think a duplicate invoice.
A duplicated. Somebody tries to tokenize the asset once again for whatever reason.
So that's the. You're right. It would have to be a bug, like basically the existence of the protocol would have to be set up such that the existence of an exit proof indicates that that it's not eligible for tokenization, like the workflow has been finalized, and that it's basically like there's a bridge has been established between that work group and another one.
If it happens in parallel, right? If two parties could try to initiate tokenization at the same time and one succeeds first, and the update for that is still not there, so there is a duplication check to verify in this small amount of time if there is a potential issue. It would just.
I think you have to. The exit proof has to be only usable. It's a zero knowledge proof, right? Meaning that proof can only be used by one work group, by one other work group. Like the exit proof itself is like, you would have to have given the public private inputs to the circuit, to the exit, like the exit circuit basically, to multiple parties, which ultimately, there has to be you have to exit it to one other work group. You know what I mean? Like if you try to use it in the context of multiple work groups, like there has to be something in the protocol that prevents that.
Yeah, I'm talking in a single work group, just as a sanity check in case that the asset already exists for whatever reason, that being, right? And then if your question was in that direction, that you would just react to returning an error to the baseline.
Possible.
Sorry?
Yes, of course. If that works, that's great, right? But
yeah, it shouldn't be possible to do that.
How do you okay, let's just just do a thought experiment. If I would tokenize something that is maybe a coin or a very valuable coin for coin collectors, and someone has bought a fake at some point, but it's a really well-made fake, and now two of these exist, and we're both tokenizing it, and for some reason we're bypassing this duplication check because it seems legit. And now
but those are two different assets, though. One's fake for sure.
Different provenance.
One is fake for sure, but there's two different assets. One is just a fake one, right?
Yeah. So what do we do about the fake one? We exit that.
Well, no, you by exit I mean you take the context of where the asset is has become eligible to become a financial instrument, and that has happened because of all of the work steps that led up to, in the example of an invoice, which is a little easier. And maybe if you talk about the coin, the baseline, the work steps involved in that are signatures from the manufacturer or like the art or like the appraiser, right? Some trusted group or consortia that's like, yeah, this is legit.
So what if
one work step
there were multiple accepted appraisers? And
if you talk about invoicing, it's a little easier in the context of invoicing, right? Because every single step in the process of invoicing, if you keep those in if you keep those compliant with like non-repudiation of claims, it suggests that like the invoice is legit, and you can tokenize it without any gotchas. Like there's not an extra zero that's been entered against it. Like everyone's in agreement that like the invoice is payable. You can then exit that invoice into DeFi, for example, and take it out of the work group that it was created in, where the workflow has ended, and send it across the network somewhere to some other work group where the proof, the exit proof, is used as the input to a new workflow in that other work group, which could involve anything. It could just involve like the one-off purchase of that invoice, or it could involve like bundling that invoice with a bunch of other invoices that we know are valid as well, that came from any number of other work groups. Like we could accumulate a bunch of invoices all from from a bunch of different work groups into a single decentralized exchange for bundled invoice tokens, right? And if you, like, for example, if you know the location in the Merkle tree, where that invoice has been nullified on one side and essentially minted on the other, the side that you're actually going to be able to use it as a financial instrument. I think there's a way to verify the proof that you have the necessary rights to use, the necessary, there's only one way to use it. It's when the proof is verified, the exit proof.
So I hope that
made sense.
Your point made sense. I don't know if Joel is satisfied with it though, so I want to advance myself here.
I don't know whether I have just a problem in my head, or I see a problem coming that might not be possible because of the way that it's structured. But mistakes happen, and it could be that we have an asset that is tokenized that represents one physical asset, but there are duplicates of that on-chain assets.
So this is there. Yeah, this is something that would need to be taken care of based on the use case. In the case of invoice factoring, you would expect that factoring companies who have the interest to prevent fraud like this, so to find invoice duplicates, that they would have between themselves and their system of record a work group which is baselining exactly the hashes of the invoice. So as soon as there is a
invoices are very simple examples because they have very standardized data structures somewhat.
Okay, yeah.
But what if we're talking artwork, for example? How's that going to work?
No, so yeah, the provenance.
If somebody is faking an artwork,
yeah.
I mean, if it's fake, that's not something that's...
Okay, hold on. Finish your point. Kyle, go straight after, please.
Oh, sorry. Yeah. So if it's a fake artwork, yeah, that's how we communicate.
That's what we do.
If it's fake artwork, then it's not something that should be solved via a baseline work group, right? Unless you have some way to digitize the physical art piece and then hash it or whatever, and then verify that the hash is unique.
Yeah.
But is it not solved
I'm not
by
sure if I'm
ownership and provenance check? Because if we are talking about artwork, which should be certified, or I don't know, gold or whatever, you would have a certificate of authenticity or something like that, which will fall under this kind of first verification step, right? So it's not, we are no longer really considering a fake, or I would say a fraudulent asset as a duplicate. We are really, I guess this point here was really tackling real duplication.
Mhm.
So everything that falls under another asset, which is a counterfeit or whatever, we can assume that the legal counterparty, which is supposed to provide the proof that this asset has been verified, won't be able to provide the proof for the second asset. Therefore, we remove that kind of fraudulent activity by just, the virtue of having this kind of legal verification step on authenticity and ownership,
Makes sense to me. And I think if the world wouldn't go crazy at some point with these artwork pieces, then that's going to work forever. However, decentralized systems like Ethereum, and because you also mentioned DeFi and decentralized exchanges and so forth, they're truly global, right? Mm-hmm. So when let's just say we have the Mona Lisa in the Louvre, and someone tokenized this, and it has everything it needs. It's attested by the right organizations. It's appraised by the right organizations. The provenance is there. And now, for some reason, there's a conflict and between some countries, including France. And now the Mona Lisa has been stolen and it's been tokenized in a different system.
This is a way hard. This is a way.
Now, it's a very extreme example, right? And I know I'm at risk of taking you all down this rabbit hole, and it might not make sense, but I think we have very soft examples of this issue. Right.
But
the Mona Lisa doesn't live. The Mona Lisa doesn't live in the matrix. Invoices, though, do live in the matrix, and so it's a lot easier to think about invoices today than it is about the Mona Lisa. Good. It's a funny intellectual conversation, but
it's something that cannot be solvable with baseline.
We have no idea if some swappages have happened between, the museum curator is a really good artist and he paints for years and he just paints the Mona Lisa himself, and it's beautiful. And at night when no one's there, he swaps them out. How do you know? You'll never be able to know.
Okay.
The digital supply chain is a lot more realistic right now for actually using baseline productively.
Oh, so we're focusing on primarily invoices for baseline. Maybe I completely.
Let's be careful. Let's be careful here. There are many use cases.
That's not what I said.
Yeah, exactly. yeah.
But if you want to further go that rabbit hole, I mean, there are ways to digitally make a footprint of a physical asset that verifies that that's the only one. And
it would have to be really good. Really good way to make a footprint. Yeah.
Yes, but let's say that you have a technology to do that, then that the output of that technology is the footprint that is then duplication check is performed based on it, right?
Then you're in business. Yeah.
Okay, but nothing like that exists.
Sorry?
Nothing like that exists.
It sounds like that's what you're going to build. So.
Okay, let's carry on because we have 2 minutes left. So I think, tokenization process, we have the list. Well, not list. We have verification items. We also discussed possible implementation options. Did I say that already? So either we have the chill contracts and the call to the token. That would be a new smart contract added to the baseline protocol, token factory contract, which will mint the on-chain asset.
Which would probably be behind a diamond contract or something like that.
Yep. Yes.
It would.
Or it depends of the functionalities of the tokenization service. It could also be responsible for the deployment of the token contract. If we choose to do so, that the only requirement that we said is that there must be a tokenization service. Now, what are all of the functionalities of that tokenization service? We have not, defined that. Give me 2 seconds, please. Oops, I need to drink. Okay, last piece, token governance. We discussed state synchronization. So what happened when the ZK circuit needs to be updated or upgraded? Circuit verification. So what happened? How do we manage changes to the token state? And how do we ensure that those are reflected in the system of record? So do we need a circuit verification for this? So we have not answered that question. We are just saying that we need to dig further and understanding if there are applicable use cases or not. We have also discussed a new contract that could be added following the diamond pattern. So it could be a maintenance contract added to the baseline infrastructure, which will be fully responsible for the maintenance of all the other contracts, smart contract within a baseline implementation. We have also discussed.
I think it's just the shield contract. The work group shield contract is the diamond pattern. I don't know. I don't think that it's. I think that there could be a use case for having another shield contract somewhere, but I think that if we just replace the current work group, basically we need to create a work group shield that allows multiple instances of the verifier shield pairs that we're currently deploying to be made upgradable in that context.
Mm-hmm. So what I captured.
I think that's it.
Yep. So we have the work group shield contract, which will have maintenance functionalities because it's following the diamond pattern. It will be able to. Yep. Then we discuss ownership, so single ownership of the asset of the tokens versus multi-ownership. And I think it's a difficult topic to tackle like this. I think we really need to take some time to think about how this will be handled, not only from this point of view, but then how do we link that back to the ownership of the off-chain asset, and how do we ensure the linkage and the reference pointing back to each other stay in sync and aligned. So that's one it's a bit challenging. And then administration, to be honest, it's a bit of a redundant topic because in every other thing there is a bit of administration to some extent.
The point there was just that ownership could be something that's not relevant to data, so it's relevant to the structure of the work group.
Yes.
And in that sense, you could have administration which is separate from the state updates to the token.
Yep. Yep.
Just a note to consider,
Yes. And I think that's it. We have done our 3-hour sessions. I was very productive. I think at high level, we have made, we have good starting point. I think we got some highlight. Okay, don't go there, go there, don't go there, go there. On my side, I'm definitely happy that we have done it because we know where to start the work, actually. Just so that's good.
It can serve for the hackathon to identify some interesting points that could be attacked first.
Yeah, this the difficult, what excites me is this is quite of an interesting one. I'm not saying it's a priority. I'm just saying that's kind of an interesting one to tackle.
Well, yeah, I mean the whole point of the upgradable shield is being able to upgrade the workflows, aka the circuit.
Yep. And this is not done yet. The work has started, but it's not completed, right? We are just trying to identify, do we add
I just made an issue.
Okay, great.
Yeah, okay, I think it's worth doing.
Yeah, great.
We've talked about it. I think it definitely, we've been talking about it long enough now to where I think it's to pull the trigger.
Okay, great. Well, thank you everybody for joining us and contributing to the sessions. This will stay for the rest of the summit, so feel free to pop in as you want. You have access, so just as a reminder, if you go to the slide section, this is where you will find the link to the mind map. Also, you can find in the notes, so you can access the mind map and you may download it, or I don't know. I think you can do that. I'm not too sure. And that's it. Thank you very much. And enjoy the rest of the day if you are in the US. If you are in Europe or in Asia, good night.
Exactly.
Oh yeah. You guys have,
Thank
yeah,
you guys.
you guys rest well.
Yes.
Thanks to everybody. Hope you enjoyed it as much as I did.
See you guys.
See you.
Cheers.
Bye.